Driving Distilled goes into its second year, and we thought we'd kick things off with something special, something purposeful, something worthy of driving Distilled. But until we find something, let's look at this, the ID.4. Now, this is a good time to look into VW's second new age EV, because just a few months ago we took a closer look at its sibling, the ID.3. I thought it was a funky little EV that was only let down by its seats and interface. This crossover is clearly a member of the ID family, at least from the front. The interior looks significantly better than in the ID.3, and that is mostly down to the seats. They are the same heated and massaging seats, but they are clad in leather and Alcantara, and as a result the entire cabin feels nicer. And then there is the panoramic roof, which can only be described as enormous. You become aware of how big the glass panel is when you order the sunshade to close, and you arrive at the next town by the time it finishes. The wheelbase is of the exact same length as the ID.3's, and thus the cabins are pretty much identical, so there is still plenty of room in the back. But due to the additional 32 cm in length, the boot can take up to 543 liters of luggage, a significant improvement over the ID.3's 385. I reckon not all 32 centimeters went into the rear of the car because, well, that would have looked a bit silly. The dashboard is pretty much identical to the one in the ID.3, and probably all VW MEB platform cars will continue to have this dashboard for the foreseeable future at least, which means there's capacitive buttons galore, there's still the tiny display with the speedo and cruise control settings, and the twisty knob to engage drive. This is the ID.4 First Max Pro Performance. If you're confused, you're forgiven. First Max means is the first edition Max, which means lots of kit, like bigger wheels, LED headlights, 3D LED tail lights, heads-up display, the panoramic roof, and other stuff. This is the top spec version safe for the GTX that was recently launched and has the same capacity battery, but comes with two motors that have a bigger total output than this one's. This one's 150 kilowatts of power and 310 newton meters of torque may only go to the rear wheels, but should prove to be plenty to move the almost 2.2 tons of bulk in a swift enough manner. And indeed, the ID.4 can accelerate briskly without ever feeling violent. Something you want to keep restricted to straights, because the ID.4 doesn't like corners very much. Even less so on these tires. Here we go again. Instead of Michelin Eco tires, this one comes on Pirelli Scorpions, which are off-road or soft-road tires to give the car a bit of SUV credibility. Even though all the torque goes to the rear wheels, do not expect any oversteer heroics. The ID.4 will not play along. First of all, you cannot turn off the traction control, at least not via the menu, because I am sure there is a fuse with traction control written on it. Well, not literally written on it, but that's probably not something you want to do. And then, is this really a car you want to take to a drift day? Well, actually, yes, because of the torque, but then apparently VW don't think you should go sideways in this car. The other point when talking about tires or wheels is range, because I am sure with the smaller 19-inch wheels you can get a few more kilometers out of the battery, but then that's a trade-off between looks and range, and probably down to personal taste. Speaking of range, a WLTP certified 500 kilometers are supposed to be available from the battery. I think that makes the car not as efficient as the Kia e-Niro that I drove a few months ago, but it's close. At least I think 500 kilometers is a usable range. all in all, I feel the ID.4 is not as sharp as the ID.3. This might be down to the tires or the weight or the length of the car maybe, so the inertia might be different. You can try to fix it by putting the car in sport mode. I mean, the ID.4 has adaptive suspension, so you feel a difference in corners, but then you really do not feel like pushing it, and it definitely doesn't turn into a Rimac Nevera. The ID.4 doesn't want you to be sporty, it wants you to be relaxed. It wants you to forget the world around you, especially other drivers. And it's the cruise control's fault. Now, I am not a big fan of recent cruise control systems because they break too early or for no reason at all, and they see things nobody else can see. And this one goes a step further because cars can recognize speed signs and thus set the speed limit for you. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. And that means one day you will end up behind somebody whose cruise control thought, well, it's 50 and it is clearly 80. Please just look out of the window. Stop this madness, please. The ID.4 then, what do we think? Well, it definitely is a step up from the ID.3. The interior is much nicer, and this coming from a non-interior person, but it makes a difference. The seats are more comfortable. There's just a nicer feel to the car. Then the battery is bigger. I know, not everybody needs a huge range. And I have to be honest, I wouldn't need 500 kilometers of range. If the choice is down to ID.3 and ID.4, and you do not necessarily need the small car because you are in a tiny city like Zurich, then I think the ID.4 is a no-brainer. But I think this is also good news for VW because the second album is indeed better than the first one. And that is good news. That makes me excited. That makes me curious for coming generations. I hope they will overthink the interface a bit. Probably not for these generations, but the next ones. And then, yeah, we'll hopefully meet again.